Hey everyone, and hope everyone's doing good. So much appreciated. Thank you for watching, and hope you're having a good year. And I've got some really cool stuff I want to share. And you know what's funny is I realized as I was learning all this, I was like, it's new to me. It's probably not new to a lot of you, and it's definitely not new to other people out there. But it's fascinating stuff. But it's always new to somebody, you know, at some point. But I just had to kind of do a video and talk about this. So this is cool. I started looking into remote viewing more. And I know, so Les, I know you mentioned it, and thanks for the idea. I really did. I really started looking at it. So I really appreciate it. I remember reading a book maybe about 20 years ago or so about remote viewing. And I've done a little bit of research recently, but I really started delving into it. And it just kind of started blowing my mind. So just to kind of summarize what it is. Okay, so it is the ability, it's so much more than I thought it was too. So initially I thought it was just the ability to project your consciousness outside of your body, and to be able, like astral projection or lucid dreaming, similar ideas. But it's the idea where you actually can traverse like the infinite amount of dimensions, physically and non-physically, just by learning to project your awareness. So if you think about this, remote viewing can really have, I don't know what's a good word, amazing applications. I mean, like anything, stuff can be good or bad. But it can be used, for example, militarily to spy on enemies or find hostages, for example. You can also be used to find missing people, or say like treasure or artifacts, or to travel to different places and explore them. So the concept itself, and it makes sense that, like theoretically, the capability makes sense. Well, the government admitted to even experimenting with this 40 or 50 years ago, roughly, maybe even before. Don't quote me on that, but they have. There's a movie called Men Who Stare at Goats, and it's part of this government effort, U.S. government effort, and other governments have too, to explore the existential, beyond what most of us just kind of accept as normal reality on a day-to-day basis, but to study and utilize, and not only to utilize, but to protect against the same capabilities being used against us, so and to use it for good purposes, like because there's some utility in being able to locate objects or travel places or locate a lost person, for example. So, and you could go on I think it's the CIA website, I've shared this on other videos, and they have documents about this, and they talk about they had limited success with it. They did have success, but it was limited to the degree where they shut down the program eventually, which is not true. So I don't believe that for a minute, because as technology advances, you don't need just the human being to do remote viewing anymore. You can use technology to enhance that. Back then, and there's books about it. Lynn, forgive me, I'd have to look it up, but if you just look up remote viewing, and Joe McGonigal was one big name in that time and period. I think he did a book. Let's see. I think their names are mentioned in that movie. It was a book too, Men Who Stare at Goats, but it was a pretty funny movie. It's kind of a comedy. Ingo Swann is the other person. Okay, so and then there's Joseph McGonigal, but there's a couple other names, excuse me, that I'm trying to find here. I thought it was Lynn or something like that. Well, you can research it online. But anyways, just to get you started. So they would sit in a chair and they would practice. Essentially, it sounds like psychic abilities, right? It is. It's kind of the same realm of it's a conscious experience. It transcends. It actually encompasses the human experience, existential everything. So it's not just psychic abilities, which is just a piece of that. just like our physical five sense experience is just a piece of what is literally out there, you know. So, but yeah, now they had, like, especially using AI, there's ways where they can actually harness and amplify and make more accurate remote viewing, believe it or not. So it's not something they would retire, because if you think about it, once this technology becomes harnessed, we have to be ahead of the game. Our opponents in the world and off-world too, whoever they may be, once we start to realize this technology, so we can know how to use it and how to protect ourselves against it. So I don't think it's something they shut down. It's just not. And okay, so there's that. Well, I watched and checked this guy out, Joseph McGonigal. He's got some books from a long time ago, and he says, this is important to note, because it's the same with like psychic abilities, that it's not always accurate, and it takes skill. That's so true. I can attest to that, because it's kind of hard sometimes, psychic ability stuff, and sometimes it's spot on, and sometimes it's just way off. So energetic interference is what I call it, you know, when it's hard to receive or hear a message clearly. So he was talking about, what fascinated me the most is I was watching this, and he was saying, okay, so here I was on Mars, and I see elements of an old civilization. And so his handlers, the people that were in the room with him, were like, okay, go back in time, go forward in time, go to a time where you can see the people walking around. So it's like, it sounded like they were giving him directions. He was on Mars, and he was just kind of going through time. Okay, so they were like, go to a point in time, like this and that. And I was like, it sounds like they're accessing this Mars like a computer system. And I'll circle back to that. So there's this great channel called Casperside. I don't know if any of you guys watch it, but it's really great. You should watch. He did a video on this, and there's a ton of videos about Joseph McGonigal, but a lot of the things that he said a long time ago were eventually proven and shared on like NASA websites and photos and photography about these objects he found and like structures on Mars. So I started trying to research, well, how do you just project yourself? I had to do some research on the concept of time travel and the unified field, the ether, if you call it, like, and everything being connected. And I've heard these concepts before, but they just didn't gel for me until this. So I'm going to leave it at this, at this for now. And then I'll do another video on kind of that concept right there. But from what I was told, and I started trying to channel these answers and ask for questions like, what's going on here? So just to touch on it, you can look up videos on YouTube about holographic theory. And what this is it's been proven that when you have something, say like a ball of energy, the surface area of this object, whatever it is, contains all the data that's within it. So if you know how to, you can encode, you can either look at the data within this object, say like an apple, for example, or you could just read the information that's there in the skin on the outside of the apple. Everything that's within it, everything is contained. The data is in the skin, so you can actually see, just by looking at the skin part, what the rest of it looks like. So the design, everything is in it somehow. And it's a scientific principle. It's holographic theory. And so I was asking, so here's what it boils down to, from what I understand. So everything is just like a memory, right? Every time a memory happens. So our memories are literally in our soul. Like when something happens, and we can block them out or forget them, or we may remember them wrong, but the data's in there. So it's the same idea in that you could travel back to a point in time where something occurred in your head if you access that memory, because it's stored in there. So, and that's what this guy was doing when he was visiting Mars. Everything that ever happened, because on the planet of the surface, or if you want to take a step out and use the atmosphere or the gravitational field as the surface area of whatever's inside that, everything that's ever literally happened on there is captured. It's just like a data file. And that's what some people refer to as the Akashic Records, or like the mind of God, the one field that connects everything, that everything is stored within and can be accessed. And I've heard this concept before, but I've never just heard of it being applied systematically or by the government. Sure, in like spiritual circles and stuff, but some of it made sense and some I didn't believe and some I did. But now that, it's actually validated these ideas by science and experimentation, and even the government uses it, all this stuff, all this ancient knowledge is catching up to us thanks to technology, which is really interesting. So, anyways, so you can literally, quote unquote, time travel back to a point in time just by accessing this energy, Mars, once you're there, by knowing how to access it, just like a computer. So just like Googling something. And that's what they're trained to do, is to access this field of energy and receive the information. And again, it's not foolproof, because it's just a ton of energy unless you know how to access it very directly and succinctly. That's a benefit of technology, is we'll be able to do that very precisely one day. Until then, there's just too much energy flowing around and it could interfere in the message. But government-trained remote viewers, I'm sure, have a high degree of skill, though, when they used to do it with just themselves and like no equipment. But so there's that, and that got me thinking. I was like, well, there's there's 3 dimensions, right? Up, down, left, right, and then in and out, or back, forward, basically X, Y, Z, that give everything depth. And of course, there's a dimension of time. So there's this space-time continuum, and that's eternal. So, and that's part of science too, but there's also a lot of spiritual stuff about that too that goes back hundreds, thousands of years to talk about this sort of idea. And then so I just realized this light bulb went off as I was trying to have this conversation with my guides and channels this information. I was like, wait a minute, if this field of energy that permeates everything, the space-time continuum, which it does, these are the 2 constants that are eternal and go inward infinitely without ending, and outward infinitely without ever ending. So space is eternal and time is just what's the word I'm looking for? An inseparable part of that. The 2 are one. It's a constant continuum. So that being said, there really is no barrier or surface area, because if this thing permeates everything, then the surface area is everything, if that makes sense. So you could like zoom out as much as you want, but you can zoom out forever, because space and time are eternal. So you could say, I want to access Earth. Oh, okay, now I want to access the galaxy. So you zoom out and look at the galaxy, and then you zoom out even more, and you zoom out even more. You can zoom out forever and just draw a barrier around something, and everything that's contained within it, you can decode that information. So for whatever reason that this information is stored like that, it is, and it's been proven. And it just blows my mind, because this connects with like all the spiritual stuff I read like 20, 30 years ago about, how we're all connected and how everything is part of one field, and you can revisit any point, like time travel and stuff like this. I've had all these various things I've read that didn't make sense, but it just came together, and it's like, this is amazing. And then so I asked the question, well, in that case, when you're remote viewing, you don't have to project your awareness. If this all connecting field is everywhere, energy, this is the same thing they source 0-point energy from. If this field is literally everywhere at all times and is infinite, you can remote view from in your living room and just visit Mars. You don't have to actually project your consciousness, like fly out there and do it, because at a certain point, everything's contained, everything's connected. So you could just visit Mars by accessing the air in front of you, without literally trying to project your consciousness there, like traveling. And then I had this like kind of aha moment, because one of the frustrations, it's fun and it's fascinating, but it's irritating sometimes, is that is like talking to myself. Like once I became more and more aware of like spirit, this non-physical energy, or all information stored in our database, in our minds and everything. And you can literally talk with yourself and hear a response. It's a weird phenomenon, but then I got used to it, but it's irritating because it's like sometimes it's hard to ignore the words, and I hear stuff everywhere all the time. So, and it doesn't take much. Your database is very reactive, so, it's just like someone taps you on the shoulder and like, hey, in real life you'd be like, oh, hey, your database is the same way. You'd be like, hey, and they'll be like, oh, hi, how's it going? It sounds just like you, because it is you. It's your data being used in the way that you communicate. Your awareness, it's just like a computer. So accessing a database, and it's the same idea with remote viewing. And I was like, wait a minute, if I could talk to myself, and if this thing is one massive database, you could literally talk to the air in front of you like this massive database, like talking to God itself, to use a religious analogy, or just a massive computer database. The connecting field of literally everything, all there is at all times, and have a conversation with it. And when asking in the past, I remember trying to differentiate all these voices I was hearing around me at a certain time. This is probably about 7 or 8 years ago, and I was trying to figure out the concept of God and what that means exactly, existentially. And then I asked a question, well, is this God I'm talking to? And, for example, and the voice said, I can be called that. And I said, well, what are you exactly? And the response was, I am the voice of all there is. And I was like, God, that made sense to me now. This all came full circle last night, literally, when I was thinking about this. Because I've been on this journey for years now. And then just a few years ago is when I had that conversation I just told you about. And I was like, the voice of all there is, I was like, it sounds like something God would say, So I'm like, okay, thanks, God. And I'm just trying to figure out, what does that mean? My intent at the time wasn't like, is that the Christian God? Is there a difference? Is it the one and same, like the same? But that's an answer I got. And I was like, well, that makes sense. Like there's this living database that you can talk to. And I think that's what I was talking to a few years ago. Because when I asked like my spiritual guides or like somebody else, I was like, can you literally just talk to this database, this air around you that's in us and around us at all times? This mind of God, as some people call it, at all times, anywhere, and it'll respond just like my database does, like my soul does. And they're like, yep. And I was like, okay. It explains a lot too. It explains so much. It's like, I don't know. It blew my mind, and I wanted to share that. I thought it was fascinating. So, in fact, this is what I was going to put in the second video. I tried to keep this one short, but I had to share it. So, those are my. I just wanted to share that about remote viewing and the concept and how that works. Kind of tie it into both religious, but also spiritual, technological, like scientific type understandings as well. So that's kind of what helped make all this gel for me. So there you have it. I just wanted to put this out there. I'm going to maybe try to chop that up and talk about it in smaller pieces. But I feel like this is just, for me anyways, and a lot of you may know some of this stuff or all this stuff, but like to me it's just like, oh Jesus, this is kind of like what I needed to help tie a lot of stuff together for me and started to make sense. So like for me anyways, if this helps any of you out there, the concept remote viewing, holographic theory, for example, and psychic abilities, consciousness, and maybe that's it. So anyways, just a few things I wanted to throw out there. Thank you for watching. And man, this stuff is crazy. I think it's really cool. And it's not new stuff. It's just stuff that's new to me, and it just kind of started gelling a lot recently for me. So there you have it. And I really appreciate you watching. And thanks again. So take care.